Welcome, everyone, to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. Before I introduce our guests for today, I have a couple of quick announcements. We have our January symposium coming up at the end of this month, which will be an incredible JP Morgan conference review. So if you want to learn a little bit more, please use the chat to get your tickets for that. And we also have our HitLab Innovator Summit in New York in May, and those tickets are also officially open. Use the QR code or the link below to grab your tickets. And with that, would like to introduce our guests for today, Luca Panarelli, as well as Kaitlin Chefalas from Withum. As you know, we love questions here at Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. So if you have any for Luca or Katie, please use the Q&A section or the chat, and I'll make sure that we get to it. With that, thank you both so much for being here today.
Of course,
happy
we're
to be
happy
here.
to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to dive in. I'm sure there's going to be so many questions, both for myself and the audience, around all things finances, tax, accounting, all that fun stuff. But before we dive into that, would maybe love just to learn a little bit more about the two of you. So if you could both maybe share a little bit more about your background and really how your kind of career paths, your journey has led you to where you are right now.
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, my name's Luca. I'm a tax partner here at Withum. I've essentially been at Withum my entire career, primarily focused on tax services within our technology and emerging growth practice. During that time, started getting interested in a lot of these health tech companies and digital health businesses that all have these really specific nuances and complexities that, other businesses don't. So I sort of gravitated toward that, always wanted to, handle the most complex problems. So that kind of led me to here, and eventually I've come to lead our digital health and health tech practice at Withum.
Wow, that's amazing. What about you, Katie?
So very similarly to Luca, I've been at Withum the entirety of my career. I actually started here as an intern during college. And then, first job, I graduated college and graduated college on a Friday and started working out with them on a Monday. So if I could go back in time, I would probably give myself some more time off. But in my early years, I kind of started as, just a bit of a generalist on the audit and financial reporting side of things. And then about 6 years ago, decided to join our technology and emerging growth group. Personally, like Luca, I just really enjoy working with startup companies and find the complexities that they face so interesting. I also think, meeting the founders and seeing what new and innovative things that they are doing, like, especially in the women's health and wellness space, is just so rewarding. And, this is accounting, right? I think we have a bit of a stigma around us that it can be a little bit boring, but when you're working in this space, honestly, every day you're seeing new things and you're meeting, new and interesting people.
I love that. And I love just the consistency with them. You guys have really kind of, I guess, seen it also grow as well, which is always kind of cool to see. I'm so curious. Can you share a little bit more? Because you both had really mentioned just kind of, it seems like just the passion behind just the space at large and the role that you can play in it. Can you share a little bit more about maybe any, professional or even personal milestones that have kind of shaped this interest in, I think, broader health and wellness tech?
Sure, definitely. I would say so. It was about like 3 to 4 years ago when one of my colleagues, Victoria, she unfortunately couldn't be here today, but her and I teamed up to co-lead our women's health and wellness group here at Withum. And so like Luca and I are part of our technology and emerging growth group. That's kind of like the broader group. And then underneath that, we have sectors. So Luca heads up digital health, and then I'm women's health and wellness. So Victoria and I, who are the co-leaders, as two women who are just, super passionate about this space and want to be able to support innovation and technology and improving women's health and wellness and making advancements. It seemed like a no-brainer for us to team up together. On a personal note, one of the things I'm most passionate about is fertility and family planning, and just given my own personal experiences with that, I'm, extra motivated to be immersed in that space, even like specifically. And then kind of broader, like I think times are changing, but sometimes women are still operating in these industries that are traditionally male dominated, right? Like as a woman who is a senior manager at a, you know, top 25 accounting firm, aspiring to be partner, this is something that, has definitely impacted me in my career. And while I've seen so much progress, there's still so much work to be done. And, I think women's health is just it's just healthcare, right? Like I think, it's amazing that I think we're giving it so much attention, right? Like I think the strides that have been made over especially the last few years where I've gotten really involved, I think is incredible. But women's health is it's also just healthcare, right?
Mhm.
Um, but there are things that are very unique and like specific to our experiences. And I think, removing stigmas around these and just empowering women to be women, um, especially in the workforce, is just something that I'm very passionate about and will continue to advocate for throughout my entire career.
That's incredible. And I love how, Katie, you're just kind of speaking to the fact that, I mean, healthcare it's so personal and it's also
Mhm.
just so systemic. And I think being able to like draw on from your own personal experiences, but also just see the industry at large and the work that can and could be done, is a great like double lens to have, I think.
Exactly.
That's incredible. Well, I mean, I thank you kind of both for sharing a little bit more about from a personal perspective, like your journey. I'm so curious now to flip it to see like how does your experience in just accounting, tax, all of these sexy finance things, how does that kind of uniquely position you to really engage with health and wellness, especially kind of when it comes to women's health or frankly just digital health more broadly, because it is an industry that is changing. So curious.
Yeah, there's a ton of, nuances and, the regulatory compliance aspect of all these different businesses really make it, a maze of things that you have to dig through to get, to make sure that you're compliant and operating appropriately. So, the fact that Withum, focuses on these different sectors, invest in different, subgroups like digital health or like women's health and wellness, really allows us to build our teams around that, right? Katie and I both have our teams built out around a bunch of younger people who are also interested in this field. And so, we really start to make a lot of headway with developing the expertise, not only at Katie and I's level, but even lower. So it just allows us to really advise specific as to the business and where the business is in the life cycle. Just to really, make sure that there's nothing that you're either leaving on the table in the way of incentives or anything that's not being considered, in terms of compliance and various exposures.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think, in our group, day in and day out, we're pretty much just working 100% with startup companies. Like we said in the beginning, that's why we joined this group, right? We find it interesting. It's a dynamic environment. And because of that, we've developed a deep understanding of the unique challenges and complexities that startups face. And that really allows us to, meet like, the evolving needs of your business, especially as it scales. So,
Mhm.
we can help with, foreseeing any potential obstacles that you might encounter. Like in this space, there's a ton of like regulatory compliance. Um, all startups have cash flow issues.
Mhm.
Um, or your scaling needs. So then, as your company grows, we're just able to grow with you and we can give you strategic guidance to help, ensure that you're able to, sustain and manage your growth effectively. A very common type of client that we have, and truly it's probably our favorite type of client, is a small startup that, got connected with us. Maybe they just needed, some initial like tax strategy help or even just like the filing of a return.
Mhm.
And they start as, super tiny client, but then they start to grow, get some funding, and we just grow with them, throughout the stages of their company. And we've taken quite a few clients from start to exit, and each time feels better than the last, right? That's what you hope for every company, right?
I love that. It's like seeing your kids go through college. It's like you were there for the entire journey.
Yes. Mhm,
Yes.
exactly.
That's incredible. And you both had mentioned this a little bit earlier. I think just being in the space that you're in, digital health, just emerging technology more broadly, you had kind of alluded to maybe some of the more kind of unique considerations, challenges, barriers. Would love if you both can kind of dive into that. What are some of the tax or accounting challenges that these types of businesses face, and how are you kind of, and with them more broadly, helping and supporting to address them?
Yeah, I think what happens with any of these businesses that are providing remote care, remote healthcare services. The regulatory requirements from a state perspective in the U.S. are incredibly complex, right? And even require like specific structures, like the MSO-PC or the friendly PC structure. And when you're in that structure, you deal with a lot of nuances that you wouldn't otherwise have to if you're just a SaaS business, and maybe that just servicing or supporting one aspect of healthcare. So management fees and intercompany transactions become really important because all those rules are made to coexist with the corporate practice of medicine rules, right? And there's different things you can focus on, right? Primarily, when we work with an early stage startup, they're getting their cues from their attorneys, often early on, right? And in terms of those regulatory requirements, right? So they may start to operate and develop a situation where, maybe it's not the most tax efficient situation because these are two competing priorities that both have to be, are necessary to be compliant in. So, in any case, when you're working within that structure, it's important you work with an advisor that kind of understands both aspects, right? You need to touch on the regulatory as well as the legal and tax side of it to get like a holistic approach to what you're doing and make sure that you're not leaving anything on the table and you're just operating in the most efficient way possible.
Definitely. That's really helpful.
And to piggyback off of what Luca's saying, this will sound general at first, but we'll get more specific in a second. From the auditor in me is like, please make sure you have proper bookkeeping and record keeping in place. But for example, like with R&D costs, these costs are so common in this space, and companies are incurring significant amount of expense in these areas. And in order to receive, the benefit from, if you're looking to get an R&D tax credit, you need to make sure you're tracking these costs, you have the underlying support for them. I am not a tax person, but I did hear that there is a change coming this year in 2025 about the R&D tax credit, where companies are going to be required to have like increased underlying documentation, I believe, like actually attached to it, which is new. Luke, I don't know if this is very, again, not a tax person, but it's something I heard. So, from, that's, vital from both the tax, and the auditing / financial reporting side of things. And then, that concept applies to just bookkeeping in general, right? I think sometimes in the earliest stages, naturally, that can get put on the back burner since, founders they're wearing so many hats, right? They're worried about operations, accounting sometimes is literally the last thing that they want to do, right? They're focusing on developing their product or, creating a software, whatever it may be. But, especially when you're pitching to, investor groups, like I'm lucky, I sit in on a lot of pitches to angel investor groups. And it's so important, right, to be able to speak to the financial performance and metrics of your company, like your cash burn, your customer acquisition costs, ARR, your hopefully realistic path to profitability, right? Like if I've seen it before, where angel investors, they start asking questions and they start poking holes in the data that's up on your PowerPoint, and you're not able to support it, right? It's not the greatest look of all time. So you want to be as prepared as possible, and sometimes unfortunately that means doing painful things with record keeping and accounting.
That's so helpful. I think something you both had kind of mentioned, I think, is really speaking to, I think at this stage, just kind of all of the different hats founders are wearing, but all of the different advisors that they may or may not be speaking to. I'm so curious, like, what is, I'll say you, but maybe just like holistically, like tax accounting in general, do you have a relationship with like attorneys for your clients? Like, is there any kind of like partnership or collaboration between the two, or do they kind of remain a bit more separate?
Yeah, there's definitely some collaboration. I mean, there's just a number of areas where we're required to collaborate, often with attorneys, right? And that's some of the things I was talking about earlier with the regulatory side of it, right? We might propose an idea that is more tax efficient, but we're not going to do that unless the attorneys are in agreement that it's satisfying the regulatory pieces, right? So we have very close relationships often with the attorneys that our clients work with. And for any number of them, there's probably dozens of shared clients between us, right? Because it's just this space lends itself to that. You need to have collaboration amongst everybody. It doesn't really make sense or work long term if you're not in alignment from a legal and tax or accounting perspective.
100%. I like that. I can definitely see how just having those types of like collaborations or partnership being like a cornerstone makes, I think, just a lot of sense, logically. So I think that's incredible. I wanted to ask, I think, maybe more broadly, when you think about kind of the work that you all are doing, the work that Withum's doing, how do you see kind of this kind of component of tax, of accounting, of just, I think, financial support, maintenance, health, contributing to just the broader advancement of, the sector more broadly? Would love if you both can kind of touch on that, I think, a bit more holistically.
Sure. I mean, I think, the creation of the women's health and wellness sector that we made a few years ago was, a huge stride in this. It was kind of, we were like, wow, this is a space where it feels like the potential of it, like we haven't even scratched the surface, right? So, since we started this a few years ago, we're always looking for ways to support the space, whether it be through sponsorships or, hosting events or speaking at events. We're always happy to provide our expertise and our advice. We'll also always welcome having an initial phone call with any company looking for accounting guidance or advice. If anyone on this call, wants to talk with us about anything, tax, accounting, um, we're here for you. And, I think the ultimate goal is for us to build long-lasting relationships with women's health organizations, and then as well as any clients that we partner with. Like we want to be like the go-to accounting firm for, if you're a women's health company, we want you, to come to Withum.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that too, that, from a tax and accounting perspective or from a business perspective, right? Separating women's health and wellness from digital health or healthcare, in a broader sense, doesn't really need to happen at Withum, right? Doesn't necessarily provide a business, reason, but for the community, it certainly does, right? And we want to be part of the community. We want to invest, and we want to bring together the founders of these great businesses, and provide for the advancement in this space, and not necessarily from a tax and accounting perspective, but really just more in the community sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it kind of does, a lot of it does go hand in hand where you kind of are able to build this community and then share resources and really just kind of be that, even just as an advisory capacity to play that role. So I think that's incredible that seems to be an area of focus and like intention with them. And I think on that note too, because you all are Katie, I think you were saying like you've been in pitches. I'm sure, Luca, you've probably been in some pitches too, or just, been working with founders and really been in the space for some time. You both have like boots on the ground. From what you're seeing from talking to all of these founders and all of these amazing startups, where are kind of like the shifts, the trends, the emerging things that you all are seeing? What is kind of exciting you about the space more broadly as you just are talking to these amazing founders?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the more recent things is the introduction of AI. Sometimes we can all feel like, is this for better or for worse? But truly, like at least, in relation to the women's health space, like I think this is I'm very hopeful and interested, right, to see where this takes us. You know, I think just as a society, we're learning how best to use AI and technology to advance us. Specifically to us, I think one of the things I'm most hopeful about is its ability to provide like tailored solutions to women. So if that's AI, like tracking your personal metrics, whether that be like your stress levels, your menstrual cycles, whatever it may be. I was actually joking with, I have a few colleagues, and they all have that, I forget the ring, it's like the orb,
Or
yeah. And it's so cute. They like track their information, they share it with one another. They're like, you didn't sleep well last night, like what's going on with you? It's actually really sweet. But using that information, right, to be able to provide diagnosis, a tailored solution for someone specifically. So that's one of the things I most look forward to. AI also, it scares me a little bit, right? Like, but I think from a health perspective, I really look forward to seeing the enhancements that it can provide in the space.
That's incredible.
And there's probably a million different directions you could go with this question in terms of the technology impacting shifts. And there's another one is just this increasing shift to remote care, right? A lot of our clients are having or creating telemedicine solutions, right? So where they can operate across the country, and also that that allows you to scale very quickly. But with that, creates a lot of issues, right? And make sure that a lot of compliance issues, even from a U.S. state perspective, right? So it just requires you to kind of be a little bit more on top of where you're operating, what the requirements are in that jurisdiction, and that is a lot of work even for us, right, to manage 50 states worth of jurisdictions, because in this country it's like each state has its own rules. It's like operating in 50 different countries. So it can be challenging, but one of the things that you want to stay on top of, because as you scale and as you get to those Series A, B, C funding stages, right, the diligence becomes a major factor, and you don't want to those negotiations are stressful enough. You don't want to necessarily have to deal with this big exposure that you didn't see coming, at the 12th hour, at the 11th hour. So just staying on top of those state responsibilities, is definitely something that is becoming increasingly important.
Yeah, and I think, Luca, on that note, are you seeing a potential shift where maybe where there aren't so much like state by state nuances, where there maybe is a bit more of like a blanket shift, or are we just not there yet?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I think you can you can bucket a bunch of different states into treating a particular product or service a similar way. I think it is moving towards more congruence across the states, and where it is a little easier to handle. But each state wants its piece of the pie, right?
Yeah.
So there's going to be competing priorities, and not every state is interested in doing things the way another state does it, right? Depending on the budget shortfalls of that state, right? So it changes quickly. It's a lot to stay on top of, and we do our best to try and bucket things together to keep the cost down, because I think we're obviously in this startup space, right? We know tax and accounting is not where you want to spend your money. You want to grow the product, you want to grow the business, and that's totally something we're comfortable operating within. So we do take a practical approach to advisory, right? And we're not certainly not advocating for 100% compliance in all these different areas, but really take an approach that I think makes sense for most startups, and try and base it on where the materiality is.
Right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. That's so helpful. So helpful, you both. Wanted to ask too, I think, we've been spending a lot of time really talking about, I think, women's health, digital health. How does your firm, how does Withum really integrate the commitments that you all have to these particular sectors, I think, into broader, like, corporate social responsibility or values? Is there kind of some kind of leveling up that you all are seeing happening?
Yeah, sure. In general at Withum, I think we've had, amazing support from our leaders, supporting the various sectors, like for us, digital health, women's health and wellness, and really empowering us to get as involved as possible. I think from the women's health and wellness, viewpoint, it's been, an unfortunate bit of a uphill battle for us, just given history, right? As we all know, it wasn't even until the early 90s that women were mandated to be included in clinical trials. So obviously, since then, significant strides have been made, in society, I think, is better understanding the importance of women's health, and our power, but there's still so much work to do. And a few of the specific things that our firm has implemented, and a lot of these are more recent, things like we have a parents network, So that's something that, it's not just applicable to women, but it definitely applies to many of us. And, this includes things like providing reimbursement for childcare, providing backup care if an emergency or something comes up. We also even provide a reimbursement for like women shipping breast milk. But even further, like we're actually, we're looking into vendors who can provide that service specifically to women. So like the women who are, personally going through that don't have to, search, find their own provider. We've also recently partnered with Progeny, a fertility and family building benefits provider. You're nodding your head. So now, things like IVF or egg freezing, those are part of our benefits through our insurance, which, I think has been a long time coming. And, it's something that I'm super proud to say that our firm has began doing. We're also looking for ways to support women going through menopause. We're a large firm. We have a lot of people going through, different stages of life. And we have a lot of people going through kind of the family building phase right now. And I think we've done, like the things I just mentioned, I think those are, huge accomplishments for us. But it's like, okay, we also have this group, of women who are in this phase of their life and how can we best support them? So, it's an ongoing discussion. We're always trying, to be better. And, we have other groups such as just like Women of Withum or Women in Tech. And while those aren't like specifically geared towards women's health only, it's just, it's still the overall goal of those groups is to make sure that we're in a healthy mindset. We feel supported in our careers.
Yes.
So we can be as successful as possible.
I love that. I love that that is kind of, it seems to be a very strong commitment. I do want to kind of ask and change to some audience questions since I know the time is flying by. One of the questions that we have is from our audience, are there particular accounting tools or methods that you recommend to prepare for VC funding requests? So any kind of best practices in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, hopefully you have a accounting software, right? I think pretty much almost every startup I've ever come across, is up and running on QuickBooks, right? Like the larger systems like NetSuite and stuff, right? That comes way further down the road. So, I know that's going to sound really basic, right? But it's not. Just like making sure that you have a trial balance and a chart of accounts set up and that you're tracking expenses. You also want you don't want to mix company expenses and personal stuff too much, right? Like a little bit of separation of church and state. So I know that probably sounds really simple, but I think, I connect with a lot of startup companies and a lot of, they'll have a one person accounting team or not even an accounting team at all, right? So I think just implementing those like best practices early on is really helpful.
Awesome. And I think on that note too, kind of another question, is there such a thing as like too soon to engage with tax or accounting services for a startup? Or is it just, as soon as you can, is that kind of like the golden rule?
I think for tax specifically, comes a little earlier on than some of the other services you might need, right? Because you have to stay compliant. Otherwise you're going to be dealing with the IRS and some of these other jurisdictions, and it's going to create a headache and unnecessary diligence for you. I don't think that we're very used to working with startups. Our pricing reflects that, right? So we're very, very willing to work with a first year company at discounted rates to get you guys up to speed, to get you guys, up and running. So no, personally, I don't think there's a time that's too soon. And I think there's certain incentives that you want to, chase after when you're early on, right? The funding incentives, right? Things like the R&D credit that we spoke about earlier. There's a version of the R&D credit that's available to small businesses where you can use it against your payroll taxes before you're even profitable from a, income or tax perspective. So that provides a real cash benefit immediately, right? As soon as you have payroll. And that's only available on a timely filed return. You can't go back and amend for it later on. So you just want to make sure you're, taking advantage of things like that so that, that could be the wind in your sails, early on.
100%. And I think on that note, since I know we're about a minute over, for our participants on the call that have probably a bunch more questions for you both, what is the best way that they can kind of get those questions, answers, or engage with you? LinkedIn, email, just kind of contact with them more broadly. Would love if you can let us know how we can kind of keep in contact if there are any specific questions that they may have for you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I would say either email or LinkedIn, whichever way works best for everyone. But either of those is perfect.
Yep.
We have all the
Agreed.
links in the chat, so perfect.
Perfect.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It was very enlightening. I definitely learned a lot that I did not know about tax and accounting beforehand, so that's very much a win. I really appreciate you both taking the time to chat. Make sure you join us for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays next week. Wanted to give one last huge shout out to our sponsors for sponsoring this incredible conversation. And of course, one last shout out to our guests for sharing their words of wisdom with us. Make sure that you join us next time, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.